Thank you for joining us for this look at the best original reporting from KPBS News. This week, I'm Maya Trabulsi. Coming up, KPBS investigates dog abuse allegations involving a breeder who operated on both sides of the border. More on the issues within the San Diego County Public Defender's Office. We learn about additional complaints made years ago and making e-bikes more affordable, the new state program that will help some riders cover the costs. Among our feature reporting this week is a look at what it's like to return to the U.S. after being deported. Most people never get that chance. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis spoke with several former deportees navigating the transition.
Yolanda Barona was detained and deported in 2011 for working without legal authorization. In an instant, she was forced to leave behind her 2 young children in San Diego. Barona was finally allowed to return in June 2022. We met her in San Isidro just as she crossed the border for the first time. Our interview was cut short when she saw her daughter and hugged her for the first time in nearly 12 years. A few months later, we caught up with Barona in her home in San Diego. She was still incredibly happy about being reunited with her children again.
For me, the most marvelous thing is to be able to kiss my children, to hug them, things that were denied to me for 11 and a half years, that were taken from me in an instant.
Barona is grateful to be back. She lives with her husband, Hector Barajas, also a former deportee, but their return, it just hasn't been what they expected.
We were homeless, like people who don't have a place to live. That was our reality. And now we are grateful for this little patio and home.
She says landlords refused to rent to them because they had no credit history. They eventually got housing through Barajas' military benefits. It's unclear exactly how many formerly deported people are allowed to return to the U.S. KPBS asked multiple federal agencies, but none of them said they tracked this data. Robert Irwin is a professor at UC Davis. In 2017, he helped start the Humanizing Deportation Project. It was just after the record number of deportations during the Obama administration, and just as former President Donald Trump was regularly demonizing immigrants.
And so some people imagined that they were just kind of criminals, or they were people who could easily readjust to life in Mexico or wherever they were going because that's where they were from.
In reality, many consider the U.S. their home. Jack Aviles was brought here when he was 6 months old. He grew up in San Diego and joined the Marines. Then, in 2001, he was deported after being charged with possession of 2 unregistered firearms. He was allowed to return in 2019, but the shadow of deportation has stayed with him.
I had to work my social, I had to establish credit, I had to rent, I had to pay bills. So all that is like, yeah, we got our to return home, but we didn't have like opportunities.
Aviles lives in constant fear of being deported again. He says he mostly keeps to himself, avoids big crowds, and does everything he can to stay out of trouble. Even when he's just walking across the street.
Think about crossing the street, am I jaywalking, am I not? I mean, literally, that's how I'm very, very paranoid, because I don't want to ruin it.
Aviles thinks of himself as a patriot. He understands that deportations are necessary, especially for violent criminals with no roots in the country. But he doesn't understand why the punishment is so severe for people with nonviolent offenses. For migrants like him, who raise families, work, and make positive contributions to their communities.
I served my sentence for the crime, but then they gave you a much harsher one, which didn't make sense to us. It still doesn't. Yeah, we're grateful for the opportunity, but that didn't kind of make sense.
Family members, including American citizens, aren't spared from the trauma of deportation. Michael Paulson became a single father of 3 young boys when his wife, Emma Sanchez, was deported in 2006.
I held a full-time job, a part-time job, and I used to take the kids to Mexico on the weekend. It's pretty hard. A lot of stress, a lot of financial burdens. You got 2 rents, 2 households to stock for food.
Sanchez was allowed to return in 2018 after spending 12 years in Mexico. Time her family will never get back.
I lost 12 years of my life. I should have been in a house with her already, and I had to start over. I had no financial money saved. Everything I made, I had to spend to support the family. It's really hard, yeah. So it's like starting over. It's like 12 years of your life is gone.
During the long separation, Sanchez dreamed of the day when her family would finally be reunited again.
It feels like we are destined to continue to suffer because you have this hope and optimism of coming back, but you get here and it isn't what you expected. In my case, my children grew up.
To ease her pain, Sanchez goes through hundreds of old family photos she keeps in boxes. They remind her of happy times, but also of what could have been. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
And that story by Gustavo is included in the latest San Diego News Now podcast. It's just one of several shows that we offer as podcasts, including KPBS Roundtable and KPBS Midday Edition. You can find KPBS podcasts on all major podcast platforms. Days after threatening a strike, those who make a living cleaning county offices downtown are celebrating. Kitty Alvarado updates us on the story of one of the workers getting their job back after claims of retaliation.
Sofia Martinez is all smiles. She says she feels vindicated now that county contractor Nova has been ordered to give her back her job with 2 weeks of back pay to cover the time she's been out of work.
No más. Ajá. Sí. Qué buena noticia. Sí, ya empecé a trabajar y el viernes me van a pagar todo mi sueldo.
The San Diego County Office of Labor Standards and Enforcement found Nova violated labor laws and retaliated against Martinez and several janitorial workers for trying to unionize. The county also ordered Nova to rehire the other workers. Martinez met us in front of the San Diego County building she cleaned for over 10 years, where last week the janitorial staff announced a strike and picketed in front of the building. She told us the backlash was swift and harsh for spearheading the effort for better pay and working conditions.
Me hicieron tirar 15 litros de químicos en el piso que apestaba horrible y quitarlo con navaja por 8 horas de rodillas.
She suffered bleeding to her hands, nose, and pain to her lungs, she says persists to this day.
Y seguimos en la lucha porque nosotros queremos un sindicato para que se nos trate mejor, nos paguen mejor y nos respeten.
We called Nova for comment. Eleanor England, the executive operations manager, told us they were very excited to have the workers back and will continue to support and hear their concerns. And while they have done work with the county for more than 15 years, they have only had this contract for less than 90 days and inherited the issues from a previous contractor. Martinez says some of the workers are still afraid of retaliation. They still have the same supervisors. But Martinez says her foster son inspired her to speak up for her rights. And he cheered when he heard that she's back to work.
Ya me enseñé a hablar. Sí, y por mí y por todas, para que no abusen de todas también.
Martinez says she learned from the experience, and from now on, she will never stay quiet when she or someone else is being abused at work. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
And this next story includes images that are hard to watch, especially for anyone with a pet. Even with increased awareness, unscrupulous backyard dog breeding is still a big problem. I investigated a doodle breeder who was able to operate on both sides of the U.S.-Mexican border despite allegations of dog abuse.
Yeah, this is our first baby.
Okay.
So this is Lizzie.
Hi, sweetheart. Are you scared? Oh, she's so scared.
And this is kind of how all of them were, to be honest.
Yeah. Lauren Botticelli runs the Animal Pad in La Mesa.
You're crazy.
One of several animal sanctuaries that took part in a harrowing rescue of more than 100 dogs from a backyard doodle breeder in Mexico.
Every kind of doodle breed you can think about was there.
Breeders in Mexico have an impact here because many of the dogs end up being sold in San Diego County.
And then we've got more back here.
Botticelli says this situation began with a plea for help on social media about a breeder who was in over her head.
Like no one knew where she was and who she was.
The breeder, Annette Rosenow, sent a geographical pin to her breeding facility in Rosarito, a beach town south of Tijuana.
When we pulled up, we actually saw it was like a hill of doodles. There were many, many more dogs than she had admitted to, essentially.
Once Botticelli saw the state of the compound and the dogs,
I kind of made it a mission to find out more about this woman.
The rescuers came over a series of visits, taking a few dogs each time. but only those Rose now would allow, the ones she deemed weirdos.
Any of the dogs that were going to still make her money that she could profit off of, she wasn't willing to give up. We saw her throw rocks, throw buckets at the dogs.
Botticelli shared a video that shows Rose now picking up a rock and throwing it at a pack of dogs. In another video, Rose now is seen being handcuffed by Mexican municipal police after making serious threats at one of the rescuers.
You're gonna kill me?
While Rose now was in custody, the teams got to work to remove the remaining dogs. But what they found will haunt them.
Annette told me this directly. They would be fighting over food to the point where they were killing each other. Any mom that was giving birth, the other dogs were eating the puppies.
That's a skull.
Dog skulls were found on the property.
Look at this.
Several puppies in the freezer. And some dogs were defecating rocks, eaten out of hunger. This x-ray shows one of the pregnant dogs with rocks in her stomach. In one video, a rescuer climbs down a hole under the house where dogs had dug a cave, seemingly swallowing her entire body.
I don't know how he's been going to the bathroom.
Many of the dogs had to be sedated to remove the matted fur tearing their skin. At first, Rose now agreed to an interview with KPBS, but then changed her mind. Instead, she has in recent weeks defended herself through text messages. She says the puppies in the freezer died of parvo, and that she has no felonies for animal abuse. She says she's being slandered by individuals and groups who have taken away her livelihood. Rose now also said that she was detained by Mexican immigration authorities and says she's now in Germany. KPBS was not able to obtain records relating to her arrest or determine whether she was deported from Mexico. This isn't the first time Rose now has run afoul of the law, and her activities haven't been limited to Mexico. For years, she ran breeding operations in the U.S. In 2017, the state of New Mexico charged Rose now with 61 violations relating to license and rabies requirements. She pleaded guilty to 11 of the counts, fined and sentenced to 23 days in jail, and a magistrate judge ruled she cannot own animals anywhere in the United States. In 2018, 6 of Rose Now's dogs died in a hot car in Albuquerque after she says they were abandoned by the person she hired to transport them to Texas. Charges against Rose Now in that case were dismissed.
And I knew before you even said her name who it was.
Cindy Sullivan is director of Torrance County Animal Services in New Mexico, one of many counties Rose Now is known to have run her breeding business.
I have so many aliases on this woman. Annette Christine Sticks, Annette Friedrich, Christina Sticks, Holly Smith.
Sullivan is among many who say the problem with animal control in the U.S. is that breeders who are shut down in one jurisdiction can just move to another county or another state.
We work for weeks and months to try to stop these things from happening. And all it takes is for them to move into the next district.
There's no question we need a central database.
San Diego Humane Society CEO Dr. Gary Weitzman says breeders will continue to have an easy time evading law enforcement until there is a way to keep track of them on a national level.
Right now, it's very casual, and we have to rely on our own colleagues that are in our industry to actually translate what's happening in another region, and that just puts the animals at risk.
You know, I was just thrilled to be getting a puppy.
In 2020, Emily Hoyt bought one of the golden doodles that Rose Now had transported across the border to a Chula Vista parking lot.
She sent me videos of the puppies. I really felt comfortable. She seemed very genuine.
She says Rose Now seemed really caring to her clients, using her Facebook group of 2,700 members to connect puppy parents. Hoyt says she was responsive and followed up about the dog after the sale.
Looking back, there probably were some red flags that I overlooked, unfortunately. But in the moment, you know, a puppy is such an amazing thing. Here's a post of her promoting one of her litters, multi-generational mini golden doodles, ready January 7th, 2023.
The same litter that was found in these conditions in Mexico.
Here's another litter.
And now here at the animal pad. But there are many doodle buyers that bought a puppy from this backyard breeder and are happy with their adorable dogs.
I've told them their dogs are the luckiest ones, but also regret supporting somebody and supporting a situation where other dogs were being hurt in the process.
And Dr. Weitzman at the San Diego Humane Society says that any transaction to sell a puppy or dog on public property is illegal in the state of California. For more information on what to look for in good breeding, you can visit sdhumane.org/breeder. And you can find more of our KPBS investigations and feature reporting online, including the KPBS YouTube page. It's updated frequently throughout the day. And that's where we also live stream KPBS Evening Edition weeknights at 5. And that story was one of our most read this week at kpbs.org. Here are some of the others. A change in towing policy is coming to San Diego. Listen to Midday's segment on the city's enforcement, especially when it comes to low-income drivers. The San Diego Zoo Safari Park welcomes the birth of a rare horse and from a breed that was once considered extinct. And after a month that brought us some high SDG&E bills, we have some tips on what works and what doesn't work when it comes to saving energy. And we have another KPBS investigation, this one from Amita Sharma, who has covered complaints out of the County Public Defender's Office. She has new information on complaints from whistleblowers in late 2020, 2 years before an ex-employee was awarded millions in a wrongful termination case.
In November 2020, at least 2 whistleblowers filed complaints against the Public Defender's Office with San Diego County. The complaints alleged retaliation, hostility, racial insensitivity, and conflict of interest. The allegations followed the firings of 3 deputy public defenders, including Zach Davina, who earlier this month won a $2.6 million judgment in a wrongful termination lawsuit against the county. County spokesman Mike Workman told KPBS in an email that the county's Office of Ethics and Compliance investigated the whistleblower complaints, but Workman said the probe was suspended when officials learned that 2 of the 3 fired deputy public defenders might sue. Dan Eaton is a San Diego legal analyst.
Once litigation begins, it is not uncommon for whatever investigation is in process to be put on hold, which is what the county essentially did. And that's because the litigation process itself has a whole different set of rules for finding out what happened.
This raises questions as to whether anything has been done over the past 2 years about the alleged hostile work environment inside the Public Defender's Office. KPBS asked the county for details on the investigation. When was the probe launched? How many people were interviewed? And when was it suspended? The county refused to comment, but Eaton says county officials had choices.
The county doesn't have to put an investigation on hold.
Here's what we do know about the investigation. Lawyer Chris Ludmer represents ex-deputy public defenders Davina and Michelle Reynoso, who has also filed a wrongful termination suit. Ludmer says he notified the county on November 24th, 2020, that litigation was pending. That was about 3 weeks after the whistleblowers filed their complaints. Ludmer says the county never contacted his clients for an interview about the complaints. However, the county did forward the complaints to Public Defender Management. Testimony during Davina's wrongful termination trial revealed that in early December 2020, a supervisor in the Public Defender's Office said in a letter to the county that an internal HR investigation report had determined the whistleblower complaints were unfounded. That's the same report Public Defender Randy Mize testified during trial that he signed, knowing it contained false statements by supervisors in his office.
I'll bet 10 to 1 that decision to put the investigation on hold was dictated by the lawyers in the litigation, or lawyers for the organization.
New York University law professor Stephen Gillers says an employer is obligated to investigate allegations of discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. In other words, the law doesn't change just because an employer has been sued.
The concern of the organization is to make sure that things are being done properly, whatever the legal fallout in the litigation.
In Davina's case, the jury agreed that as a gay man, he was discriminated against for his gender expression. At one point, Davina was asked whether he was too flamboyant and animated during his tenure review panel. The jury also found that Davina faced retaliation. Gillers says the pressure only intensifies on a workplace to investigate when jurors agree with the plaintiff, such as they did in Davina's wrongful termination lawsuit. That jury also found that the county did nothing to prevent discrimination and retaliation against Davina.
The heat is on, and they have an affirmative obligation to figure out what it is that was going on that persuaded the jury to award a multi-million-dollar verdict.
Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
February is Black History Month, and for the first time, a symbol of social justice is part of the celebration for local schools. KPBS education reporter MG Perez was there for a special flag-raising event at San Diego Unified Headquarters.
Together, yeah, one at a time, sort of, and moving all the way to the top, okay?
The wind was stifled this morning, but the message was not. This month, the Black Lives Matter flag is a symbol that will fly over the administration building of the San Diego Unified School District, and students are well educated on the significance of what that means.
It doesn't always feel great learning about the bad and unfair things that happen to Black people, but it's important to learn about it.
They put it in words and recited it in poetry.
Hey, Black child, do you know you are strong? I mean, really strong? Do you know you can do what you want to do if you try to do what you can do?
Teachers and administrators recognized the words of Harlem Renaissance poet U.E. Perkins. 12-year-old Stephanie Adegayi had words of her own.
Being a Black person is an ongoing journey, but you can never, ever give up.
This year, district officials decided to raise the Black Lives Matter flag to show their commitment to diversity and equality across all campuses.
And as many of them said, it has been a challenge for them individually. And I know I struggled with identity growing up and am proud of who I am today because of educators.
While the flag is a symbol of celebration this Black History Month, there are many people who say there is still plenty of work to be done, especially when it comes to social justice and education here in California. The current state budget has $300 million earmarked to help students who receive free or reduced school lunches. Governor Newsom proposed the spending to give children living in poverty support in closing the educational gap. But some Black education leaders believe that excludes almost 350,000 children of color who are not in poverty and have fallen behind their white classmates who are.
When you really analyze the data, it is not a factor of whether or not students have wealth or, are middle class. It is a factor of whether you are Black right now in school.
These Black students remain in reality and also hang on to hope.
Like, you see all those bad things that are happening, one day you're going to make an impact and you're going to stop those things. One day your community is going to be a safe community where everyone is treated equally. That's a message in the San Diego Unified School District that passes with flying colors. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Our coverage of Black History Month includes some suggestions from KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando. She has a roundup of comic book themed events happening this month celebrating Black culture, and that is available online at kpbs.org. We're expecting some sunny skies this weekend, especially on Saturday, and that means a lot of people will be out on e-bikes, which are growing in popularity. Claire Strong has details on a new program that will help more people get one of their own.
Electric bikes, or e-bikes as they're known, are more popular than ever. Kids use them to get to and from school, surfers ride them to their favourite spot, and many people view them as an alternative to cars. And they can even reach speeds of almost 30 miles per hour.
Well, I love it for getting about town. It's a much easier form of transportation. I never have to worry about parking. We've got great weather usually year-round, right? So it's a quick, easy, convenient way for me to get to places.
But the steep price tag, which can be around $2,500 per bike, has prevented lots of people from being able to afford them. However, a new statewide program called the Electric Bicycle Incentive Project hopes to change that this spring. The project is being run by the California Air Resources Board with input from a local nonprofit, Pedal Ahead, which runs a similar one in San Diego, as well as the California Bicycle Coalition.
Equity is really central to the program. People will not have to put the money out front. It's not a rebate, like a tax rebate, like many of the electrical vehicle programs. In this case, you will get a point of sale voucher. So you find a qualified bike that you want to buy, you go to a qualified vendor, and you ask to buy the bike, and your voucher will be applied.
In addition to making owning e-bikes more equitable, it's hoped the initiative will also cut the number of cars on the roads and cut greenhouse gases. For those who qualify, the voucher will be worth between $1,000 and $2,000 to be spent at a California-based e-bike retailer, which is welcome news for local businesses like Happy E-Bikes, which is headquartered in Carlsbad.
It is a great way to get around town. There's no gas needed. Electric power, I believe, is the future. And as technology grows, our batteries will get more compact, more distance out of them, and we become a little bit more educated on how to handle the batteries especially.
I'm going to put my helmet on. Like this.
Under the watchful eye of Dan, I decided to try out an e-bike for the first time myself.
Here we go. Oh my God, wow.
$10 million has been set aside for the program, which is solely for people below the poverty line. And you can find out more information about the initiative, which is due to begin over the next few months, at calbike.org. Claire Strong, KPBS News.
And we hope that you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thanks for joining us.